Hi, folks. Welcome back. Today we're diving into some of the wildest clips making the rounds on the internet, and they show just how far off the rails Democrats have gone. Case in point, Kamala Harris out here screaming, "No mandate," like a broken smoke alarm that just won't shut off. And by the way, someone whose music sounds as appealing as a smoke alarm, Bad Bunny, was recently cast to perform in the next Super Bowl halftime show, only to turn around and tell Americans they should learn Spanish if they actually want to understand any of it. Because, you know, nothing says thank you to the country that invited you into their living rooms quite like insulting the entire nation ahead of one of its most beloved traditions.
Logro de todo, demostrando que nuestra huella y nuestra aportación en este país nadie nunca la podrá sacar ni borrar.
Speak English, dude.
And
good.
If you didn't understand what I just said, you have 4 months to learn.
Hey, how about you learn English instead, Bad Bunny? And I say that as someone who's first-generation American. My entire family isn't even from America. They're from Brazil. None of them live here. My first language was Portuguese. I had to learn English as a second language. I worked on my accent, and yeah, that's what happens when you actually care about the country you live in. You want to assimilate instead of imposing your own culture. Because why even come here if the goal is to just reject what makes America great? Most immigrants understand this. The vast majority come here precisely because they know America is better than any place in the world, and they genuinely want to become a part of this country. Sure, they hold on to some traditions, but that's natural. What's dangerous is the small fringe that takes pride in coming to America, usurping everything she has to offer, and refusing to become an American. So why not just stay back home? We've seen this pattern in certain enclaves like parts of Michigan and Minnesota where some immigrant communities not only refuse to assimilate but openly impose their lifestyle and religious laws on everyone else. The Muslim community in those regions just doesn't want to be a part of America. It's not immigration, folks. It's a soft invasion. When people arrive with no intent to assimilate, the goal is to turn America into the very countries they fled. It's a passive form of warfare, and it's what we're watching unfold in places like France and the UK. Muslim populations there have grown rapidly, strategically in nations with declining birth rates, and instead of integration, many leverage the welfare state, build parallel societies, and gain influence by sheer numbers. The result is obvious. Native Europeans are losing their own countries, not through war, but through demographic conquest. And liberal elites cheer this on as if erasing their own culture is some moral duty. But every culture has a right to exist, including European culture. And yes, I am an immigrant from Brazil, but culturally I'm European. That's where my family comes from both sides. On my mom's side, Italian. On my dad's side, Portugal. That's where my roots are. And it's what I identify with. It's the food I eat, the churches I go to, the language I first spoke. There's nothing wrong with honoring those roots. What's wrong is tearing down one culture in the name of another, or turning immigration into a weapon to erase a nation from within. And erasing what makes Western society make sense is a part of this Democrat Marxist playbook. Just look at this so-called social scientist, doctor, or whatever this woman is, talking about raising genderless children.
We're not trying to eliminate gender. We're actually trying to show how limitless gender can be, right? And just really helping kids find their own path to it and follow their lead so that they feel comfortable and authentic.
No, dude.
In America, someone who knows how it's done is gender creative parenting guru and social scientist Dr. Kyle Myers.
What?
7 years ago, Kyle and her Australian husband Brent had their first baby, Zuma.
We didn't assign a gender at birth, and we didn't disclose Zuma's reproductive anatomy to people who didn't need to know. The reproductive anatomy that my kiddo was born with, I didn't want to assign too many labels and assumptions and, destinies on top of that.
So you believe that if you're born with a penis, doesn't necessarily make you a boy?
Right. Because so a lot of people who are born with penises identify as a boy, and a lot of people who are born with vulvas identify as a girl. A big part of that is because they're assigned the boy and girl labels, right, and are socialized as such.
Isn't that confusing for a little child?
I think it's actually more confusing to make children think that what, the 8 billion people on the planet all neatly fit into one of 2 boxes?
That is objectively retarded. This woman should be stripped of her degrees, and the university that trained her ought to be shamed into oblivion. There is no positive outcome to this poisonous ideology, only chaos and confusion. There's a reason the gender binary exists, folks. It is rooted in reproduction, in the biological reality that sex exists so that men and women can pair, attract one another, and continue life. Gender, as an expression of sex, naturally flows from that. To dismantle it and pretend we can redefine attraction is to create people who will never find a place in society. She even admits it herself, 8 billion people on this planet recognize the male-female reality. And it's only liberal white women pushing to break this paradigm. Why? Because the goal is simple, folks, to weaken masculinity. This entire movement of raising children without gender is just the latest wave of feminism. A desperate extension of a project that already achieved legal and social parity. With nothing left to conquer, the target now is manhood itself, undoing masculinity not as a social construct, but as identity, so men can be subjugated. At its core, this is Marxism dressed in new clothes, the spirit of Jezebel resurfacing in our age, just as she sought to corrupt Israel in the Bible. And Christ himself warned that anyone who harms children invites severe judgment, which is exactly what this mother is doing to her son. You look at the child, he's clearly a boy, but she's gaslighting him, dressing him up, obscuring his identity, setting him up for trauma. He will grow up confused, estranged from who God made him to be, forced into painful self-discovery, and very possibly bitter with resentment towards his mother. Maybe one day he will forgive her. Let's hope for that. But she is planting seeds of deep harm. And the irony, these are the same people who scream about climate change and humanity destroying the planet while they themselves are destroying the very biology of the next generation. Leftism has advanced to the point where it has become a biological weapon of sorts against men, against family, against order. It inverts nature to weaken masculinity, and it ought to be seen for the evil it is. The solution isn't government mandates. It's cultural strength. It's the church and the community standing firm so children aren't used as experiments for these sorts of broken ideologies. Speaking of broken, someone that just can't seem to get fixed is Hanoi Jane, who's still going around and running her mouth like anybody should care.
Really, one of the key things that I want to get across. We can protest, but ultimately we have to take power. It's about power.
Oh, okay.
That's why voting is so important. You know, when democracy is failing you, you don't pull back and kind of become more moderate. You lean into it and become even stronger. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I'm glad Hanoi Jane can at least admit it, that for Democrats, it is all about power. She literally says it herself. It's not about constituents. It's not about the American people. It's definitely not about preserving the American way of life. It is all about control for the Democrats. Raw political power. The ability to dictate how you live. You heard it right out of her mouth. It's about power. And then, of course, she tries to tie it into voting, but we know what that means in practice. In states like California, Democrats have spent years refusing to clean up bloated voter rolls with hundreds of thousands of outdated or ineligible registrations left untouched. That's not democracy. It's just pure manipulation. And the fact that someone like Jane Fonda, a Hollywood multimillionaire who's been lionized by Democrats for decades, is now openly saying the quiet part out loud tells you where we are, folks. Democrats have become so shameless, they don't even bother to pretend anymore. They don't care about you. They will never care about this country, and they will burn it down if it means grabbing just a little more power. Oh yeah, and they will get super triggered over a little hat meme.
We sat down the day before, and he wasn't serious. He put these red hats on the table, and he's joking around. And honestly, in the meeting, Margaret, I got the feeling he didn't even know what was happening, that the crisis was impending, that people would pay such a... He once said, they're going to pay all that? That would be bad for me. And so the court here is the American people.
Mm-hmm. You know, Sleazy Schumer may be sitting down, but he really ought to take a few more seats, because this whole shutdown he's whining about is his fault, and his fault alone. See, if Democrats would simply stop trying to hand out free health care to illegal immigrants, the government wouldn't be grinding to a halt. But the truth is, they don't care about you. They don't care about the country. They care about clinging to power. That's why they keep pushing to give illegal immigrants not just health care, but more rights and more benefits than actual tax-paying citizens. Federal assistance of every sort, state assistance of every sort, and eventually the ballot box. Because without that imported voter base, Democrats can't win with Americans anymore. And they know it. That's the desperation driving all of this, folks. Even in California, their supposed fortress, they're starting to lose ground with Democrat registration slipping and net voter losses piling up in what used to be the safest territory for them. The tide is turning, and Schumer's obsession with red hats is just a distraction from the fact that his party is collapsing under the weight of its own failed coalition. And the brightest face of that failure is no one other than Jasmine Crockett.
Stop falling for the okie doke. Stop believing the lies that they are putting out there and the terrible racist tropes that they are constantly using to rile people up. It is time to recognize that while you thought the enemy was the immigrant, or you thought the enemy was the trans person, or you thought that the enemy was the black folk, or you thought the enemy were the women, when the reality is that the only person that is harming you right now, if you are struggling to make sure that you can pay your bills, if you're struggling to feed your family, if you are struggling to find a job, if you are struggling to keep your business open, or if you are a farmer, while we currently have record level bankruptcies by farmers, it is not any of those people on the list. It is the old white Nepo baby that is sitting in the White House that is causing all the destruction, pain, and problems that you are enduring.
Whenever I hear Jasmine Crockett speak, I lose hope that politics will ever self-correct. She's pure political theater, no substance, dressed up in Zoomer slang. Calling Trump a Nepo baby is absurd. Trump may have started with a loan from his father, but you don't expand modest New York rental properties into a multi-billion-dollar global brand of hotels, golf courses, and luxury estates all over the world if you're some kind of failure. That's not inheritance. That's enterprise. Democrats loved him for decades. Rappers idolized him in their lyrics because everyone knew Trump was successful. And yes, he filed for bankruptcies, but so have countless entrepreneurs. 50 Cent did the same after making millions off vitamin water. And nobody calls him a fraud. Crockett's narrative is dishonest because she tries to lump every criticism Republicans make into racist tropes. Nobody thinks immigrants are the enemy. What we want is immigration that respects the law. Entry by merit, not loopholes, not exploitation of the welfare state. The social safety net should serve Americans struggling to get by, not people breaking the system. Nobody thinks trans people are the enemy either. What we want is for children to be left alone, free to grow up without irreversible medical interventions pushed on them. That's not bigotry. That's basic protection. Even European countries that led the way on gender medicine, Sweden, Finland, and the UK, have now rolled it back after finding no long-term benefits. And nobody thinks black people are the enemy either. Black Americans have contributed enormously to this nation. The issue is when leftist policies in cities like Chicago enable crime, letting communities destroy themselves with no accountability, or when soft on crime ideologies allow repeat offenders to kill innocent people, like with Irina Zarutska. That's the real problem. Not race, but lawlessness. Crockett can't address these realities, so she hides behind identity politics, attacking Trump with a cheap insult and deflecting from failed Democrat policies. Republicans want solutions that actually improve lives. Democrats thrive on division, offering emotional manipulation instead of any actual real answers. And that's why the only way Democrats can get any sort of attention or traction is when they fall into the political theater. And Kamala Harris recently tried it, and let's just say that she face planted.
And here's the other thing that is quite unprecedented. And it was the tightest, closest presidential election in the 21st century. He does not have a mandate. That is not a mandate. That is not a mandate.
That week, unhinged woman got about 10 inches from the nuclear codes, folks. Let that sink in. And by the way, I say 10 inches because she lost on literally every front. She lost all 7 swing states. She lost the popular vote. She lost most of the counties Joe Biden carried in 2020. And in the process, she dragged down the entire media establishment with her. Each of those losses was another inch, another mile that kept her far away from the nuclear football, and thank God for that. Thank God Donald Trump spared this country from having to endure the two worst women in modern American history, Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton. History will remember the bullets he dodged, and in Trump's case, that's literal. Imagine if Kamala had actually won. This unstable person screaming, "No mandate," like a lunatic, lying straight to the American people and still getting applause for it. That's how far the Democrat Party has fallen, folks. They will cheer a lie simply because it comforts them. And when you strip it down, that's not politics. It's emotional therapy for a movement that can't face reality anymore. It's actually sad when you think about it. These people are so broken on the inside, they can't even acknowledge truth anymore. Pray for them, folks. Someday, hopefully, they'll find their way back to reality. Anyway, folks, I think it's safe to say this is the end times for Democrats. I honestly don't know if they can recover from this. They seem so profoundly lost and traumatized that the entire party is existing in a perpetual state of just disassociation. They've gone full schizo. No better than some guy on Skid Row just rambling to himself. That's the Democrat establishment today. And you really do have to pray for these folks because they can't even talk about reality anymore. I've spoken to Democrat voters in just the past few weeks, and the moment you bring up real issues, they immediately shut down. They deflect, they panic, because deep down, they know the truth. Their party is hurting. They have no substance. They have no issues. They have nothing grounding it except hatred of Trump. And it literally pains them to admit it. And I feel so sorry for them. I really do. Because Republicans love this country and want to preserve it. And look, I know there are still moderate Democrats out there who love this country as well. It's not all about power for them. They value America. They value this country's traditions, this country's promise. And look, if you're one of those moderate Democrats who is actually invested in preserving this country, I would honestly say that you'd be better served voting Republican until your party finds its way back. So here's a question I'll leave all of you with. How long will people keep propping up a movement that openly despises the very foundations of this nation? And if you know the truth, if you see the collapse with your own eyes, what's holding you back from breaking with the lies and standing with a side that still believes in America? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. I hope you have a terrific day. Peace.